this video, we're going to focus primarily on venting a 90% furnace, as there are many different ways that a 90% furnace can be vented. Many technicians feel that they have to get as much condensation out of the vent as possible before it gets back into the furnace. This is commonly done on the intake side, where the combustion air is being drawn from the outside. In this particular fitting, you notice that the condensate is being taken out of the combustion air pipe before it enters the furnace. In some environments, this is necessary as condensation builds up on the intake to the furnace. Here's another example of a trap being put in the combustion air pipe, taking the condensation out of the combustion air pipe before it reaches the furnace. These methods are perfectly fine in the combustion air side, but when you put a trap in the vent side, that's when you might get into some problems with carbon monoxide poisoning. If you look at the installation guides for any 90% furnace, you're going to find various warnings about carbon monoxide poisoning. And you need to heed these because it is very important for yourself as an individual installer, and also as a representative of your company, that carbon monoxide poisoning is a very real hazard, and you need to take it very seriously when you're installing a 90% furnace, and make sure that the venting system is installed according to manufacturer specifications, so there is no liability on your part or your company's part. So the major word for today in this video is going to be liability. In many of your 90% furnace installation guides, they tell you that you can draw the combustion air for the furnace from the inside air where the furnace is installed. But they also have a caution in there that tell you that in certain types of buildings, commercial buildings, buildings with indoor pools, laundry rooms, hobby or craft rooms, or chemical storage areas, that you really need to bring outside air in for combustion due to chemical exposures. And if the air is exposed to these certain substances that they list here, the outside air must be brought in for combustion, because these solutions will damage the secondary heat exchanger and could cause premature failure. A second consideration for pulling combustion air from the space is that you have sufficient air for combustion. In the installation guide, you will see diagrams like this that will tell you what minimum air is required to support the combustion of a certain gas furnace. And you need to make sure that you have sufficient combustion air being supplied to the space so the furnace will continue to burn. It is also necessary, if there is a naturally drafted gas hot water heater in the same space, that you have enough combustion air for the furnace as well as the gas hot water heater. If insufficient combustion air is provided, you could develop a condition where the combustion air is being pulled down the natural draft of the gas furnace, spilling carbon monoxide into the space and creating a very dangerous situation. Most major manufacturers of 90% furnaces have two different ways to vent the furnace to the outside air: drawing combustion air in from outside and venting the products of combustion to the outside air. There is the two-pipe type of termination, which can be in different configurations depending on how many furnaces you have in the space. And then there's also the concentric type. These two types of terminations are the most common that are being used for 90% furnaces. There are other types of terminations out there that are being sold by parts departments, but you need to be careful in using those, as most of them are not certified by the manufacturer to be used on their product, and could be a problem if there is any issues down the road with the installation. There are also diagrams in the installation guide which show you how far you need to be away from any opening in the home, such as a door or a window, so that you don't have the possibility of drawing products of combustion into the livable space. Most manufacturers also give you options of drawing combustion air either from a crawl space or from an attic. So if you have sufficient air in the crawl space and the attic, you can pull combustion air from those two places. But the vent pipe must be run through the roof or through the sidewall to get the products of combustion outside to the outside air. All of your 90% furnaces have a maximum equivalent vent length table that will list the unit size in BTUs, the altitude at which the furnace is being installed. In this particular example, 0 to 2,000 feet, if you use a 3-inch vent pipe, you can run up to 200 feet of venting material. So always consult this table when you're running your vent to make sure that you're within the manufacturer's specifications. There's also a table in all of your 90% furnaces for deductions from the maximum equivalent vent length, and you should be familiar with this one, like when running refrigerant pipe, as you have to subtract for all your fittings that you put into your refrigerant lines. The same thing is true for the vent. You'll notice that a mitered 90-degree elbow, you deduct 8 feet. A medium radius 90-degree elbow is 5 feet, and a long radius is 3 feet. So long radius elbows are preferred as they have the least deduction on the vent. And then, of course, you have to figure in the concentric or the two-pipe termination to make sure that you are still within your maximum equivalent vent length for that furnace. So as we have said before, most manufacturers make allowances for combustion air inlet moisture traps, and they will give you various diagrams of how you can set those up so that any moisture coming in the combustion air pipe can be diverted from the furnace into the condensate trap. These are common practices on 90% furnaces. So we've said a lot about condensate traps on the combustion air pipe, but we haven't said much about a trap kit for the vent pipe. This is where it gets a little sticky and we get into the carbon monoxide issue. Most major manufacturers have an external trap kit that is available to put a condensate trap on the vent pipe for the 90% furnace. The instructions for using these trap kits must be followed to the T to make sure that you don't have any liability issues with carbon monoxide poisoning. There are many different kits available out in the market to catch the condensate before it gets back into the 90% furnace. One thing the technician needs to realize is that a 90% furnace is designed to take all the condensation that is produced within its secondary heat exchanger and expel it through its condensate trap. There are kits available like this one where the vent motor and the products of combustion are discharged out of the furnace and a trap is provided to get the condensation out of that vent. Here's another example of a downflow venting external trap kit that shows the pipes going through the blower compartment, which needs to be sealed completely, and then a trap being provided to take the condensate out of the vent pipe. Like we said, the instructions for these types of installations must be followed to the T to make sure there's no liability issues with carbon monoxide poisoning. So we can't stress enough the warnings that you find in the installation guides for carbon monoxide poisoning. Anytime that you put a gas appliance in a occupied structure, you run the risk of having carbon monoxide poisoning. And it is a hazard that you as a technician and installing contractor needs to take seriously so that we don't have any issues with the installation. A number of years ago, I was invited to a fire inspection where a gas furnace was being suspected of starting a fire in a home. And the inspectors there were taking a lot of pictures and gathering evidence to try to figure out why the furnace had started the fire. When they inspected the furnace, they found that there was no drip leg on the gas line going into the furnace. Even though this probably would not cause a fire, it was a center of concern for the inspectors because gamma requires a drip leg to be put into a gas line supplying a gas furnace. So this was a real liability issue on the part of the installer, that he did not install a drip leg. And something as simple as that could have caused a real problem for him and his company as they did this installation on this gas furnace. So this is why I'm stressing so strongly that when you install a gas furnace, make sure that you're installing it with the recommended venting procedure by the manufacturer so that you don't have any liability in the installation. The last thing I want to leave you with is the word liability. And also make sure that when you're installing a gas furnace or servicing a gas furnace in someone's home, that you double check and make sure that they have a carbon monoxide alarm and that it's working. And if they don't have one, stress very strongly that you have them on your truck and you'd be glad to sell and install one for them to protect them and their family.
Go to Airefco.com for more videos, like, subscribe, and check back every week for new videos.